A black general just stopped at a quiet gas station outside Culpeper County, Virginia. Her boots were still polished from the high-level military debrief just hours earlier. Her nameplate, trailer, still glinted under the morning sun. She reached for a bottle of water and a protein bar, not knowing that in less than 7 minutes, she'd be handcuffed like a criminal, humiliated by 2 small-town deputies who dismissed her rank, mocked her service, and searched her vehicle without consent. But what came next turned the entire system upside down. 6 words from her watch made the Pentagon respond in real time, and the fallout was faster than anyone could have imagined. This story will make you angry, then inspired. It's one you'll remember every time you see someone in uniform, and every time you wonder if justice really exists. Stay with me. Before we dive into what happened, comment below. Where in the world are you watching from right now? This is a story that deserves to be heard everywhere. It started with nothing more than the quiet hum of an engine and the click of a turning ignition. Brigadier General Monica Traylor was tired, not in the ordinary way, but in the bone-deep exhaustion that only comes after decades of holding a system together from within while carrying its blind spots on your back. The sky still carried that misty, early glow, light enough to see clearly, dark enough to feel like a secret. She eased her black Ford Edge into the gravel lot of a quick-fuel gas station, its paint faded, one of the neon letters half burned out. Her hands were steady on the wheel, wrists still bearing the muscle memory of combat training, diplomatic briefings, and midnight strategy calls from halfway across the world. The debrief she'd left behind had involved satellite imagery, Eastern European tensions, and the kind of silent nods that decide who sleeps soundly and who doesn't. But none of that mattered here. Not in this town. Not on this gravel. She stepped out, her boots crunching into the earth. The air was damp, the kind that clung to skin and uniform alike. A deep breath in. Her uniform, though impeccable, clung tighter than usual, as if it too could sense the unease about to unfold. Monica scanned her surroundings. A teenage clerk barely out of high school stood behind the counter inside, thumbing through his phone with indifference. She noted the man at the corner scratching lottery tickets, the sleepy flicker of the gas station lights, the empty stretch of Route 29 humming with distant semis. It should have been uneventful. She entered the store, nodding politely. The teenager behind the register looked up, eyes trailing from the American flag patch on her sleeve to the nameplate on her chest. For a moment, he just stared. "You in the military or something?" he asked, his voice dripping with slow suspicion, not curiosity. "I am," she answered evenly. No smile. Just plain truth. She placed her items on the counter, bottle of water, protein bar. The teenager hesitated, then finally rang her up, avoiding eye contact. She paid in cash. "Thank you," she said as she turned to leave. But the air had shifted. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and sense a change, though nothing's been said? That's what it was. Something unspoken curdled in the air, like milk left in the sun. Outside, Monica leaned against her SUV and pulled her phone from the center console. She had a quick call to make. Her driver needed to know she'd be arriving ahead of schedule. Nothing formal. Just a check-in. But that check-in would be the last moment of peace she had for the next 45 minutes. As she ended her call, she caught movement in the corner of her eye. 2 sheriff's cruisers pulled into the lot. Fast. One blocked her in from behind. The other swerved up to the front pumps. Doors flew open. Boots pounded pavement. It wasn't the sound that startled her, it was their eyes. Alert, clenched jaws, hands hovering near their holsters. For a split second, Monica's mind ran through possibilities. Maybe a robbery nearby. Maybe a case of mistaken identity. But when one of them stepped forward and barked, "Ma'am, put the phone down and keep your hands where I can see them," her instincts kicked in. Calm. Always stay calm. "I'm Brigadier General Monica Traylor," she said, her voice level. "I just came from a secured site outside D.C. Hands up." Now, the officer cut her off, circling behind her too close. Her heart didn't race. Not yet. Training overruled panic. She gently placed her phone on the hood, fingers spread, palms visible. "May I ask what this is about?" "Suspicious activity," the second cop chimed in. "We got a call, woman loitering, in military gear, acting aggressive." Monica blinked. "I've been here 6 minutes. I bought a snack. I made a call. That's all." "Do you have ID?" the shorter one asked, already reaching toward his cuffs. "Yes. My military ID is in my bag." "You're welcome to check." He didn't wait. He grabbed her wrist. "Sir," she said, her voice firmer now, "I am a commissioned officer in the United States Army. You're making a mistake, he sneered. You're not above the law just 'cause you play dress up. And in that instant she knew. It wasn't about the call. It wasn't about suspicion. It was about control. The cuffs clicked around her wrists. Tight. Tighter than needed. Deliberate. The parking lot, previously still, was now watching. A woman paused mid-pump. A teenager on a bike rolled to the curb. Phones came out. None of them spoke. But eyes were wide. Monica didn't resist. No yelling. No tears. She stood bound, breathing, focused. One officer searched her SUV without consent. The other taunted her. You gonna tell me why you're dressed like that? Trying to scare people. I've served this country for 26 years, she said, her voice unwavering. Yeah, he smirked. And I'm the Queen of England. But something was shifting. A boy across the lot lifted his phone and shouted. That lady's a general, the crowd murmured. Tension rippled. And Monica, with nothing left to prove, tilted her wrist just enough. The screen on her smartwatch lit up. 4 taps. 1 breath. Authorization Bravo 3, she said. Emergency protocol. Connect Pentagon liaison. And just like that, the game changed. The moment her smartwatch chimed with the words connecting Pentagon liaison, the parking lot changed. Not visibly, not yet. But something in the air pulled taut, like a held breath, like the moment just before lightning hits. The officers froze, just for a fraction of a second, but in that pause was a crack. A fracture in the facade of authority they'd worn like armor. And Monica Traylor, still cuffed, still standing tall, didn't flinch. She'd lived through battle zones that made this feel like a rehearsal. The taller officer, the one who had cuffed her, adjusted his stance awkwardly. His mirrored sunglasses now reflected not dominance, but confusion. The shorter one looked at the smartwatch like it was a live grenade. What the hell did you just say? He barked, a little too loud, voice rising not out of control, but fear masquerading as fury. I said, Monica repeated slowly, Authorization Bravo 3. Emergency protocol. That line is secure, and the person on the other end will want to speak to me. As if on cue, the device crackled and a calm, clipped voice cut through the humid silence. General Traylor, this is Lieutenant Colonel Brigham. Are you safe to speak? The pause was unbearable. 1 beat. 2. No one moved. The gas station clerk had all but disappeared behind the counter, peeking from behind the slushy machine like a child who'd lit a fire and hoped it wouldn't spread. No, she replied into the air, steady as stone. I've been detained unlawfully. Rural Virginia. Culpeper County. Immediate assistance required. Understood. Response team inbound. Then silence. But not the empty kind. This one carried weight. Thick, accusing. The kind of silence that whispers, you messed with the wrong one. A low murmur swept across the lot. The teenager on the bike was still recording. Across from him, a woman in nurse's scrubs lowered her water bottle, watching like she'd just seen a courtroom verdict passed in real time. 2 older men by the ice machine stood rigid, not speaking, but very much present. The quiet wasn't about passivity. It was tension coiled and waiting. The shorter officer tugged Monica's arm, but now his grip had softened slightly, uncertainty spreading like ink in water. You got someone coming here? He asked, no longer mocking. Just unsure. Monica didn't even look at him. Yes, she said, and they won't be asking for introductions. The taller officer, Pete, his name tag visible now, looked toward the road like backup might suddenly materialize to save him. She could be bluffing, he muttered. His partner shook his head. Bluffing doesn't get you a Pentagon line, Pete. That one sentence, that was the crack. That's where their bravado began to crumble. A moment later, a voice rang out from behind the fuel pumps. She's a general, the nurse called. Why don't y'all just check her ID? Another voice chimed in. The boy on the bike. I saw it. It said general. She showed them and they ignored it. Monica remained still. Not smug. Not satisfied. Simply anchored. It wasn't in her to gloat. That wasn't the point. This wasn't revenge. This was exposure. And sometimes, truth needs silence to echo loudest. The taller officer took a cautious step toward her SUV again. His hands hovered above the open door where her bag still sat, unzipped, rummaged through, disrespected. Go ahead, she said evenly. You'll find a case marked federal. Open it, he did. Hesitantly. And when he pulled out the ID badge, the lamination gleamed under the light. Brigadier General Monica Traylor. Department of the Army. He read it once. Then again. His lips pressed into a tight, pale line. Damn, he whispered under his breath. This is real. His partner came up beside him, staring at the badge like it might burn his fingers. This changes nothing, he muttered, trying to salvage the authority that was slipping from his voice. It changes everything, Monica said, finally turning her head to meet his eyes. It changes why you're going to have to explain this to people who outrank you by 10 lifetimes. The shorter cop opened his mouth, then shut it again. He looked down at her cuffs, as if seeing them for the first time. Maybe we should talk to our sergeant, Monica cut him off. You'll want to preserve your body cam footage. All of it. Don't touch it. Don't edit. And for your sake, don't lose it. Suddenly, the sound of tires on gravel drew every eye toward the road. Not flashing lights. Not sirens. Just a silver Ford F-150, driving too smooth, too direct to be accidental. The vehicle pulled into the lot, glided to a stop. A man stepped out, tall, coat flapping, badge clipped to his belt. Lieutenant Colonel Garrett Brigham. He didn't shout, didn't run. He walked with precision, with purpose. General Traylor, he called, loud enough for everyone to hear. You all right? Not injured, she replied, calm as ever. Just unlawfully detained. He turned to the officers. I need those cuffs off. Now, they hesitated. He stepped forward, slower now, but his tone dropped an octave. I said now. You've already made this worse than it had to be. Pete swallowed hard. His fingers fumbled with the cuffs. They snapped open. Monica brought her hands forward, rubbed the pressure from her wrists. Red marks. No blood. But pain doesn't always show. The shorter officer, desperate now, blurted, Look, we had a call, someone reported a threat. And she identified herself, Brigham cut in. With federal ID. And you cuffed her anyway. Monica didn't move. Didn't speak. She was letting the system speak now. Her silence was heavier than any command. A voice came from inside the station, muffled but urgent. Someone else had joined the fray. An agent. Female, sharp black suit, Office of Military Legal Affairs badge on her lapel. Which one of you initiated the stop? She asked as she stepped onto the pavement. The officers glanced at each other. Neither wanted to be first. Finally, the shorter one answered. We got a call from the clerk. Said someone was aggressive. In uniform. She turned slowly, eyes locking on the teenager now crouched behind the counter like he hoped no one would notice. An agent peeled off toward the door. Inside, the clerk's face turned pale. Outside, the woman agent looked back at the officers. You're relieved from field duty. Effective immediately. Your command will contact you for internal review. Pete stammered. We didn't mean harm. Monica spoke for the first time in minutes. You didn't mean, she said slowly. But you did. There's a difference. One that matters. Brigham nodded. And one that will be documented. Phones were still rolling. A dozen videos. 100 eyes. And somewhere between the parking lines and the checkout counter, a reckoning had taken root. Monica turned away, not toward her car, but toward the crowd. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. For those of you recording, don't stop. What just happened wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a decision. And decisions come with consequences. Brigham leaned in, voice low. Do you want to leave, ma'am? No, she said. I want them to see it through. I want to watch them face what they started. And so she stayed. Not in defiance, but in presence. Because sometimes justice doesn't ride in with flashing lights, it arrives quietly, and stays long enough to be witnessed. Brigadier General Monica Traylor stood at the edge of the parking lot, the morning sun creeping higher behind her like a second spotlight. Her cuffs were off now, but the red, raw impressions around her wrists still pulsed, a quiet reminder that sometimes uniforms don't protect you, they provoke. Around her, the crowd had thickened. What began as a casual gas stop had become a scene. A story unfolding in real time. But no one watching could have predicted how much farther this story would stretch. Across the lot, the two deputies, Pete and Dorman, stood off to the side now, whispering in clipped, panicked tones. Their body language had shifted entirely. Gone was the swagger of authority, replaced by the posture of men cornered by their own choices. Neither dared look in Monica's direction anymore. Just behind them, the agent from the Office of Military Legal Affairs was reviewing something on a tablet. She didn't speak often, but when she did, the tone left no room for discussion. Monica had heard that voice before, on deployments, in Pentagon briefings. It was the kind of voice that didn't require volume to demand obedience. But Monica wasn't looking at them. Her gaze was fixed on a boy, 17, maybe 18, still seated on his bike, still recording. His face wasn't angry. It wasn't afraid. It was intent. Focused. as if some instinct told him, you don't look away from moments like this. And he didn't. She walked toward him slowly. The crowd parted in silence. You still filming? She asked. He nodded. Yes, ma'am. What's your name? Zaire. Well, Zaire, she said, her voice soft but lined with steel. Don't delete that footage. I won't. She nodded once. Good. She turned back toward the lot, just as 3 more unmarked vehicles pulled in. One of them bore tinted windows, so dark they looked like obsidian mirrors. The doors opened in practiced, synchronized movements. More agents. More federal presence. But still no shouting. Still no sirens. Just a gathering storm dressed in government-grade suits and quiet authority. Out of the third vehicle stepped an older black man, tall, bald, with a clipboard and the bearing of someone who knew where the real power lay. He scanned the scene, then walked straight to Monica. General Traylor, he said, extending a hand. I'm Special Investigator Roland Vance, Department of Defense Office of Inspector General. I was briefed en route. Do you want this public or private? Public, Monica said without hesitation. If they cuff me in public, they can answer for it in public. He nodded. No resistance. Just quiet agreement. Very well, he said. Let's start with the basics. He motioned to one of the other agents, who handed Monica a slim silver tablet. It was preloaded with a digital affidavit template. Monica began to type, slowly at first, then faster. The words came with the weight of memory, not emotion. She had long since learned how to separate the two. Her fingers didn't tremble. Her jaw didn't clench. She typed as though writing an intelligence report for Foreign Command. Because in a way she was. Meanwhile, the officers had been moved to the side of the building. Not under arrest, not yet, but very much surrounded. Pete kept looking around like he still hoped for an exit, a loophole, anything to erase the last 20 minutes. But Dorman had gone quiet, eyes cast downward, as if he already knew how this ended. The gas station clerk had finally been escorted outside by one of the agents. His name tag read Devon. He was barely 19, with a lanky build and the uneven voice of someone already regretting every decision he'd made since waking up. I didn't know, he stammered, standing in front of the military legal officer. She looked serious. Like intense. I thought she might. Might what? The agent asked flatly. Devon swallowed. I don't know, do something. Did she threaten you? No. Did she raise her voice? No. Did she even speak to you beyond buying her items? No, ma'am. The agent didn't say anything. She simply turned the tablet toward him and pressed play. On screen, Monica walked in. Monica paid for her water and protein bar. Monica exited without a word beyond, thank you. Devon's face turned a slow, spreading red. The agent tapped the screen to pause. You leaked. I didn't mean to, he blurted. It just felt, I don't know, off. Weird. You don't see people like her around here. People like her? Devon winced. I mean someone in uniform. That serious. It freaked me out. The agent didn't move. And that moment of you being freaked out is why a United States Army Brigadier General was humiliated in front of a dozen civilians, in full uniform, in broad daylight. He looked down. I didn't think it would go that far. You never do, she said, then turned her back on him. Monica had finished typing her statement. She handed the tablet to Investigator Vance, who skimmed it with the eyes of someone who'd read thousands of such reports. But this one felt different. This, he said quietly, is going to the Secretary of Defense. Monica nodded once. Good. At that moment, Zaire stepped forward. I filmed the whole thing, he said. Do you want a copy? Vance turned to him, surprised. Monica smiled slightly. This is Zaire, she said. He stayed. He saw. Vance nodded. Yes. I want everything you recorded. We'll make a full chain of custody. As the boy began to airdrop the files to the agent's device, the tension in the air began to shift. Not dissipate. Just evolve. The balance of power had fully reversed. Suddenly, Monica's phone buzzed again. It was a call from D.C. She turned her back to the crowd and answered. Trailer. General, this is Colonel Ayers. Just got word. Your footage is trending. Pentagon's been tagged in over 100,000 posts in the last 40 minutes. It's going viral, ma'am. Do you want us to suppress or lean in? She didn't hesitate. Lean in. Understood. She hung up. By now, the two officers had been escorted into a separate vehicle for off-site processing. Not arrested, but detained. The crowd began to scatter. Some lingered. Some walked away shaking their heads. But the phone stayed up. The internet would see everything. As the sun climbed higher and heat shimmered off the blacktop, Monica finally walked back to her SUV. The protein bar she had bought was still on the dash, unopened, warmed by the sun. She looked at it, then picked it up, unwrapped it, and took a bite. It tasted like resolve. Before getting in, she turned back to the boy on the bike. "Zaire," she said, "don't let anyone tell you silence is strength." He nodded, eyes locked on hers. "Ma'am," he said, "if that's true, then today you were the loudest person here." Monica nodded once, stepped into her car, and shut the door. She didn't drive off right away. She just sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, the smell of hot rubber and asphalt rising all around. Then, finally, she whispered to herself, "Let the system watch itself now," and pulled away. As the black SUV rolled out of the quick fuel parking lot, Brigadier General Monica Traylor didn't head straight to the base or her temporary quarters. She didn't even turn toward Washington, though she knew her presence was expected back in less than 3 hours for a closed-door debrief on the exact military operation she'd just returned from. No, she drove. Not fast, not frantic, just steady, as if each mile might scrub away the sting still seeping beneath her skin. But it didn't. The wind through the window couldn't erase the pressure of those cuffs. Her wrists still bore faint marks, more psychological than physical. Her rank had meant nothing to those men. Her calm, her compliance, her professionalism, discarded like wrappers in that parking lot. But what haunted her most wasn't their contempt. It was how easily they assumed they'd get away with it. 30 minutes down Route 29, Monica pulled over at an old roadside diner that looked like it hadn't changed since the late 70s. Red vinyl booths. A rusted jukebox by the door. Inside, the only sound was the low hum of a ceiling fan and the occasional clink of ceramic coffee mugs. She chose a booth by the window, facing the road, her back to the wall. Old habit. The waitress, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a name tag that read Betty, approached with a smile that had probably seen decades of road-weary strangers. "What can I get you, honey?" "Coffee. Black. And just toast," Monica said. Betty nodded but paused, tilting her head. "You okay?" Monica looked up. A dozen responses crossed her mind. "I'm fine. Just tired. Long morning." But none of them were honest. And Betty didn't look like someone who needed polite lies. "I've had better days." The waitress offered a nod, a touch of understanding in the way her gaze didn't linger too long. "Well, you're not the first person to sit in that booth with a day like that. I'll be back in a sec." When the coffee came, Monica wrapped her hands around the mug and let the heat sink into her palms. She didn't sip it right away. Instead, her mind retraced the events with a soldier's precision. The trigger, the response, the escalation, the control, the recovery. But something kept circling her thoughts, not the way the officers treated her, but the moment their confidence broke. It hadn't been her title. It wasn't the badge. It wasn't even the Pentagon call. It was doubt. The moment they realized she might be who she said she was, their entire foundation cracked. Because their authority wasn't built on justice. It was built on the assumption that no one would challenge them, that no one would see. And yet, everyone did. Phones. Witnesses. The kid on the bike, Zaire. That nurse. The construction workers. A community of strangers who didn't intervene with their hands, but who stood their ground with their eyes, their phones, their presence. Silent sentinels. Monica took a sip of the coffee. Bitter. Just the way she needed it. Her phone buzzed. She expected another message from Colonel Ayres, or perhaps an internal legal team follow-up. But it wasn't from anyone in uniform. It was a number she didn't recognize. The message was short. "General, my name is Ava. I was at the gas station. I recorded everything. I'm a teacher, not an activist, but I've already shown my students the video. They need to see this." My 12-year-old asked, "Why didn't they believe her?" I didn't have a good answer. Monica stared at the screen. The coffee grew cold in her hands. A second message came in, this one from a Marine veteran she didn't know personally. "Ma'am, I'm white, retired, and I served in Kandahar the same years you did. I watched the footage 10 times. I thought uniforms protected us. I thought we were all on the same side. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Just thank you for not losing your cool. Because I would have." Then another. "I don't trust the system, but I trust what I saw. You didn't flinch. You made them look at themselves. I hope that tape ends up in every police academy training room." And then a fourth message. "My daughter wants to be in the military. I used to be proud of that. Now I'm terrified. But after watching you, I told her, be like her." but carry your truth like armor. Monica set the phone down. She wasn't ready for gratitude. She wasn't seeking praise. All she had wanted that morning was a bottle of water and 7 minutes of silence. Instead, she'd been turned into a symbol. She hated that. Not because she didn't believe in standing for something, but because symbols are always simplified. She didn't want to be a clean, edited headline. She wanted people to feel the tension in her shoulders as those cuffs locked in. She wanted them to see the shift in the crowd's eyes when the Pentagon line connected. She wanted them to sit in that discomfort. And yet, she knew how this worked. The system would fight for its image before it fought for its accountability. They'd issue statements. They'd review footage. Maybe even suspend a badge or two. But systems don't heal from press releases. They only heal when the truth festers so loudly in the public square that even denial becomes impossible. Betty returned with the toast, now slightly overdone but still warm. "Looks like you got some thinking to do," she said gently, setting the plate down. Monica smiled faintly. "More like processing." Betty nodded. "Well, you take all the time you need. You're safe here." Monica looked at her, trying to decide whether to ask the question pressing in her throat. Finally, she did. "Would I have been safe here if I walked in wearing this uniform an hour ago?" Betty blinked. Not defensively. Just honestly. Then she answered the only way a person could when they cared more about truth than comfort. "I don't know," she said. "But I would have wanted you to be." Monica appreciated that more than any patriotic platitude. She paid the bill, left a tip bigger than the meal deserved, and stepped back into the sunlight. Her phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't a message. It was a call from her liaison at the Pentagon. "General," the voice on the line said, "we've received over 24 formal inquiries from senators and defense officials about this morning. The footage is on 6 major networks now. You're being requested to speak." "Where?" Monica asked. "A community center in Alexandria. Civilian audience. Mixed demographic. Low security. They want your voice, not your uniform." There was a pause. "Will you do it?" She didn't answer right away. She looked out across the highway, where a group of kids were walking home from a nearby middle school, backpacks swinging, laughing about something that had nothing to do with race or rank or recognition. Just kids being kids. Finally, Monica replied. "Yes," she said, "but I won't wear the stars." "Understood." She ended the call. Back in her car, Monica drove off again, not toward vengeance, not toward spectacle, but toward a microphone. A small one, in a modest room, with folding chairs and neighbors and kids with wide eyes and big questions. And this time, she wouldn't be interrupted. Because sometimes justice doesn't roar. It walks in quietly, in civilian clothes, and tells the truth, out loud. The folding chairs were arranged in imperfect rows, their metal frames groaning slightly each time someone shifted. The community center in Alexandria wasn't meant for national stories. Its walls were decorated with hand-painted murals from local school children, chipped at the corners, faded by sunlight and time. A paper banner near the entrance read "Neighborhood Voices, Conversations That Matter." It had been hung for a different event, one about local zoning laws, but someone decided to leave it up. It fit now more than ever. Brigadier General Monica Traylor stood just beyond the doorway, waiting for her name to be called. Not by rank, not by title, but as a citizen with a story. Her name was on the flyer taped to the window outside. A conversation with Monica Traylor. What justice looks like in uniform. But inside, there was no uniform. She wore civilian clothes, dark jeans, a navy blouse, and a pair of flats so plain they might have come from any department store clearance rack. No ribbons. No brass. Just her. A volunteer stepped forward, whispered that the room was ready, and handed her a small clip-on microphone. She hesitated for a moment before attaching it. The room wasn't large, maybe 60 people in total, a mix of curious neighbors, students, veterans, churchgoers, and a few reporters with notebooks already open. A couple of tripods stood quietly at the back, streaming to whoever cared enough to listen beyond these walls. When she stepped up to the podium, a wobbly wooden structure that tilted slightly to the left, the murmurs died down. A hush took its place. Not the awkward kind, but the anticipatory kind. The kind people hold just before something important begins. She adjusted the mic once, then let her hands rest on the podium edge. No speech. No teleprompter. Just her. "I didn't come here to relive what happened," she said. Her voice was steady but quiet, drawing people in like a confession whispered in a chapel. "You've seen the footage. You've read the headlines. You don't need me to repeat it. A few heads nodded. Some people folded their arms. Others leaned forward. I came here because something's been sitting with me heavier than the incident itself, she continued. And it's what people said after. She let that linger for a breath. Some folks said, "Why didn't she yell?" Others said, "Why didn't she fight back?" And then there's the one that keeps echoing in my head. If that had been me, I wouldn't have stayed so calm. Monica looked around the room, meeting a few pairs of eyes directly. She didn't blink. "You think calm is a choice?" she asked. "You think being handcuffed in uniform in daylight, with a dozen people watching and 2 officers not listening, is a situation where I had options?" The silence was electric now. Someone in the back let out a quiet exhale. "I wasn't calm because I felt safe," she said, her voice tightening slightly. "I was calm because I didn't." There it was. The crack. Not in her composure, but in the collective denial so many people carry about the value of poise under pressure. A veteran in the front row bowed his head. A woman near the aisle clutched her purse a little tighter, not out of fear, but because her knuckles needed something to grip. "There's this idea," Monica went on, "that service gives you immunity. That if you wear the uniform long enough, if you've earned your stripes, people will treat you with respect." She paused. Her voice softened. "But that's not how it works. Not for everyone. It didn't work for me." From the left side of the room, a man in a worn VA baseball cap raised his hand. Monica acknowledged him with a slight nod. "General Traylor," he began, Do you think what happened was about race?" She didn't flinch. Didn't fumble. She answered the way a woman answers when she's had to think about the same question for 30 years. "I think it was about assumption," she said. "An assumption comes in layers. Skin, gender, posture, tone, authority. Assumption says I shouldn't be in that uniform. Assumption says I shouldn't drive that kind of car. Assumption says I shouldn't carry myself with the confidence I've earned." She inhaled deeply. "Those officers didn't stop me because they were curious. They stopped me because they didn't expect someone who looks like me to belong in that role. And when I told them the truth, they chose not to believe it." Another silence. But this one was heavier. Less about anticipation, more about understanding. "You want to know the hardest part?" she asked. "It wasn't the cuffs. It wasn't the humiliation. It wasn't even the crowd watching." She leaned in slightly. "It was knowing that if I had raised my voice 1 octave louder, if I had flinched wrong, if I had reached for my ID too fast." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. The silence finished it for her. She let that moment sit, then stepped away from the podium slightly. "You want change?" she asked. "Then start by asking different questions. Not, why didn't she fight? Ask, why did she have to be afraid to? Not, why did she stay calm? Ask, why is calm the only thing keeping her alive?" There was a stirring in the crowd now, not noise, not disruption. Just the sound of realization sinking in. She stepped back to the center. "I've served this country on 2 continents. I've briefed presidents. I've led soldiers. I've lost soldiers. But none of that mattered in a gas station parking lot 20 minutes from home. Because they didn't see my resume. They saw my skin. They saw my gender. They saw a threat where there was none. A beat. So if you're watching this, if you're here tonight because you care, ask yourself this. Would the system have protected you that day?" She paused again. "And if the answer is no, then maybe it's time we stop pretending the system protects everyone the same way." A hush followed. Not empty. Full. The kind of quiet that comes after hearing something unarguable. No applause. No ovation. Just reflection. Then a small voice, young, uncertain, spoke from near the front. "Can I ask something?" Monica turned gently toward the voice. It was a girl, maybe 11, maybe 12, seated beside a woman who could have been her mother. "Go ahead," Monica said. "Are you still proud to be a soldier?" Monica didn't answer right away. She smiled softly. Sadly. "Yes," she said, "but I'm more proud to still be a truth teller. Because uniforms change. But integrity stays." The girl nodded. She didn't say anything else. But her eyes said she understood more than most adults ever would. Later that night, after the last question had been asked and the last recorder turned off, Monica walked alone to her car. She didn't feel lighter. She didn't feel resolved. But she felt heard. And sometimes that's the beginning of real justice, not courtroom verdicts, not policy changes. Just the courage to speak. And the courage to stay in the room while others finally listen. The morning after the community forum, the city felt different. Not because the skyline had changed or the streets were quieter, Those things remained as they always were. But there was something in the air, a certain taut awareness, as if the walls themselves had heard what Brigadier General Monica Traylor said the night before, and were holding their breath to see what would come next. It wasn't about headlines anymore. It wasn't even about justice in the courtroom. It was about recognition. About people realizing, perhaps for the first time, that silence isn't neutrality. It's complicity. At 7:45 a.m., Monica sat in a small, unadorned room in the Pentagon's internal legal division. The windows were frosted. The chairs were all the same shade of uncomfortable beige. There were no military insignias here, no medals, no ceremonial flags. Just binders, forms, and professionals who spoke in clipped, careful tones. Across from her sat 3 attorneys, 1 civilian, 1 JAG officer, and 1 Department of Defense compliance investigator. To Monica's right sat Colonel Brigham, quiet, as always. He'd offered to speak on her behalf. She declined. "I know why you're all here," Monica said, before they could ask the first question. "You want to assess liability, determine fallout, and most importantly, control the narrative. You want to know how much damage has been done. But I'm not here to help you spin anything." The civilian lawyer, a younger man in a tailored Navy suit, cleared his throat. "With all due respect, General Traylor, we're here to understand the facts." Monica arched an eyebrow. "Then ask me what really matters, not just what happened. Ask me why this keeps happening." There was a pause. The JAG officer, older, female, glanced at her colleagues, then looked at Monica. "Why does it keep happening, ma'am?" Monica leaned back slightly. "Because perception outranks principle. Because it doesn't matter how high I rise if the people in power are more afraid of who I am than what I've done." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Each word was deliberate, honed from years of briefing rooms and war rooms and now truth rooms. The civilian lawyer finally asked, "Do you intend to press criminal charges against the officers involved?" "No," Monica said. They all looked up. She continued, "Not because I don't have the right, but because this is bigger than 2 men with badges. This is about every policy that allowed them to act with impunity. I'm not interested in vengeance. I'm interested in change." The compliance investigator scribbled something in his notepad. "We've already launched an internal review," he said. "The sheriff's department has placed both deputies on administrative leave pending a federal inquiry." "Leave," Monica echoed, "isn't accountability. It's a timeout." Silence again. Colonel Brigham finally spoke. "Ma'am, there are procedures. They're in motion. Slowly, but they're moving." Monica didn't respond. She just looked at him. That was enough. Later that afternoon, her inbox flooded. Not with apologies, but with responses. And that was different. Messages from journalists asking for interviews, civil rights organizations offering platforms, colleges requesting guest lectures, and military academies seeking her insight. Not just about the incident, but about leadership, restraint, and dignity under fire. But it was one message, a short one, that caught her breath. Subject: "You don't know me, body, General Traylor. My name is Devonte Richardson. I'm a former police officer. I resigned 2 years ago. I just wanted to say, I saw what happened to you and I believed you from the start. Not because of your rank, but because I've seen the other side. I've seen how the rules are bent and the eyes look away. I wasn't brave enough to stay in the system. You were brave enough to stay calm." That hit me. Respectfully, Devonte, she read it twice. Then a third time. Sometimes the most powerful affirmations come from those who once wore the same uniform as your oppressors and chose to take it off. That evening, Monica drove back to Culpeper County. Not to return to the quick fuel gas station, which was now shuttered for renovations, its parking lot empty, the faded flags taken down. She went somewhere else. The local VFW hall, tucked behind a laundromat and a bait shop. She hadn't stepped foot in a VFW in years, not because she didn't belong, but because she rarely had time. Tonight, she had a reason. Inside, the air smelled of stale coffee and wood polish. A group of older veterans, black, white, Latino, sat around a long plastic table, dominoes halfway played. Conversation halted when she entered. Not out of suspicion, but respect. One man stood. White hair. Army t-shirt. Name tag read Fred. "You're her," he said. "I am." He pulled out a chair. "You sit down. We've been waiting to talk to you." They didn't talk about politics. They didn't mention the sheriff's department. They talked about how it felt to come home from war zones only to be questioned at grocery stores. About how it felt to serve a flag that some believed only belonged to part of the country. about how leadership looked like what Monica had done, not shouting, not shaming, but standing steady, unmovable. I remember in '72, one vet began, "They told us to take off our uniforms before boarding the plane home. Said it'd be safer. You reminded me what it looks like to not take it off. Even when the danger's here." Monica nodded. "I didn't wear it to be seen. I wore it because I earned it." Another vet spoke. "And they still saw you as a threat." She didn't argue. She didn't have to. That night, before she left, they gave her a coin. Not an official medal, just a challenge coin from the post. Worn edges, etched with the phrase, "We stand for each other." As she walked out into the cool Virginia night, Monica looked up. The sky was clear, the stars scattered and bright. She thought about the stars on her shoulder that those officers had ignored, and how somehow those ignored stars now burned brighter in the public eye than they ever had in a parade. She knew this wasn't over. The footage would continue to circulate. The story would be picked apart. Some would call her poised. Others would say she was performative. Some would praise her restraint. Others would say she should have fought harder. None of it mattered. Because justice isn't always loud. It's not always swift. But it is relentless, when people refuse to let the moment pass. And Monica Traylor wasn't about to let it pass. She had more to say. And the world, for once, had stopped to listen. 2 weeks after the incident, Culpeper County was still reverberating with the aftershocks of what had taken place in that dusty gas station lot. The sheriff's department had issued a formal statement, sterile, detached, crafted by attorneys rather than conscience. It read, "We are cooperating fully with the Department of Defense in its ongoing review. We regret the events that led to public concern and reaffirm our commitment to serve and protect all citizens." Nowhere in that statement was the word apology. Nowhere was the word accountability. But outside the carefully composed lines, the consequences were still unfolding, slow but deliberate. Brigadier General Monica Traylor sat alone in a small conference room at a local middle school where she had just finished speaking to a group of 8th graders. It wasn't part of any media tour. There were no cameras, no publicists. A teacher named Ava, yes, the same woman who had messaged her the morning after the gas station encounter, had asked her simply, "Will you come talk to my students?" They saw the video. They have questions. Monica didn't hesitate. The kids had asked everything. Not just about the incident, but about life in uniform. About fear. About discipline. About race. About power. One boy raised his hand and asked, "Were you scared you might get shot?" She'd answered without embellishment, "Yes." Another girl asked, "Why didn't they believe you?" "Because some people don't expect someone like me to have authority," she said. "Even if I've earned it." Now, sitting in the empty room with the echo of those voices still hanging in the air, Monica felt something unexpected. Not anger, not even pride, but clarity. She had spent years inside systems, military, political, cultural, that thrived on silence. Moments like this, where truth was spoken plainly, without a filter, were rare and sacred. Her phone buzzed. It was Colonel Ayres again. "General," his voice was brisk. "We've got a situation." Monica straightened. "Go on." "There's a protest planned outside the Culpeper County Sheriff's Department tomorrow. Not organized by any major civil rights groups, local parents mostly. Veterans. A few clergy. They're calling it a stand with her demonstration." She didn't respond right away. Ayres continued, "The media's already got wind. You'll be asked if you support it." "Do I?" He chuckled quietly. "I think you know you do. But the Pentagon's asking you to remain neutral. At least publicly." She let the silence stretch. "Ayres," she said finally, "do you know how many soldiers I've seen sent into situations because someone else didn't want to take a side?" He sighed. "Too many." "Then tell them I won't wear the uniform. But I'll be there. As a citizen." And just like that, the decision was made. The next day, she arrived at the sheriff's department without brass, without ceremony. She wore a gray blazer, slacks, and a single pin over her heart, the U.S. flag worn but clean. The steps of the building were already filled with people. Mothers holding signs that read "Service deserves respect." Teenage boys wearing ROTC jackets, elderly veterans in folding chairs, and a minister reading quietly from the Book of Amos. Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like a mighty stream. Monica stood quietly among them. Not above. Not separate. Among. Reporters hovered at the edges, unsure how to approach. They didn't shout her name. They didn't rush her. They just observed. For once, The story was not driven by the spectacle of confrontation, but the force of presence. At noon, the sheriff's department doors opened. Sheriff Lewis Daniels, a man whose name had been curiously absent from most of the official statements, stepped out. He didn't have his usual press entourage. No podium, just a folder in his hands and the weight of a county on his shoulders. He approached the crowd, cleared his throat, and spoke into a handheld mic. "I want to address what happened 2 weeks ago," he began. "Not as a sheriff, but as a man who's served this community for over 25 years. People watched, unmoved." He continued. "The actions of Deputies Dorman and Peterson were not just misguided. They were unacceptable. They reflected poorly on our department, and more importantly, on our judgment. We have failed to maintain the trust placed in us." Still silence. Monica didn't blink. He glanced at the folder, but then closed it and held it at his side. "This isn't a press release," he said. "This is personal. I've watched the footage. I've listened to the community. I've spoken to General Traylor privately. And I want to say publicly, what happened to her was wrong." There was a slight stir in the crowd. A woman near the back whispered, finally, "I'm announcing today that both deputies have officially resigned. The department is undergoing external review procedures. And starting next month, every officer in Culpeper County will be required to complete enhanced bias recognition training, as well as undergo quarterly accountability audits by an independent oversight board." No cheers erupted. No applause. But Monica felt something shift. Not in volume. In weight. Sheriff Daniels took one final look around. "You may not trust me yet," he said. "But I want to earn it. And I know that starts now." He turned and walked back inside. A few moments later, Ava appeared at Monica's side. "You think it was real?" she asked. "Or just for show?" Monica considered that. Maybe both. But sometimes, even theater starts conversations. They stood in silence together. Later, as the crowd began to break apart, Monica remained. A few parents approached her. So did a veteran who had flown in from Georgia just to stand on the sidewalk beside her. And then the boy from the gas station, the one on the bike, Zaire. He wasn't recording this time. No phone in hand. Just his presence. He stepped closer. "I wrote something," he said shyly. "Not a video. Just a poem." Monica smiled. "Can I hear it?" He nodded, pulled a small notebook from his jacket, and began reading softly. She didn't yell, she didn't swing, she didn't crumble under anything. They saw a threat, she stood as truth. They feared her calm, they mocked her proof. But silence held and silence won, and power shifted in the sun. Now justice stands not in her shoes, but in the eyes of those who choose to see her not as what they fear, but who she is, and why she's here. Monica swallowed a sudden lump in her throat. "You wrote that?" He nodded, eyes down. "Yeah." She bent slightly, her hand on his shoulder. "Then don't ever stop writing, Zaire. The world needs your voice." He smiled. "It has yours now." And in that moment, surrounded not by brass bands or fanfare, but by words, citizens, and clarity, Monica understood something she hadn't quite grasped even through years of service. Victory doesn't always wear medals. Sometimes it stands quietly in the streets and listens. 3 weeks after the protest in Culpeper County, the story that had begun with a stop at a dusty gas station had spread far beyond Virginia. Clips of the incident had been translated into 7 languages. Students were citing it in debate tournaments about systemic bias. A senator from Oregon quoted Monica's words in a speech on the Senate floor. "Calm is not a privilege. It's a survival mechanism." But for Brigadier General Monica Traylor, the aftermath was not defined by headlines or hashtags. It was something quieter, more personal. She found herself on the receiving end of hundreds, maybe thousands, of messages. Most of them were kind. A few were cruel. Many were confused. But one message stayed with her. It was handwritten, folded inside a yellow envelope with careful block letters, and a return address from Topeka, Kansas. "Dear General Traylor, my mom showed me the video. She said, 'See? This is why you always keep your head high even when people try to push you down. I'm 13. I want to be like you when I grow up. Not because you're a general, but because you didn't flinch. Even when they treated you like you didn't matter. You didn't yell. You didn't cry. You just stood. That meant something. Thank you. Love, Ava, same name as your teacher friend." Monica read it 3 times. She didn't cry. But something inside her softened. Some knot that had tightened quietly over the years. The one that kept her standing straight even when her soul ached to bend. That morning, she put on civilian clothes, no pins, no insignias, and walked through the Pentagon corridors unnoticed for the first time in years. That was intentional. Her schedule was clear. No meetings. No orders. No official inquiries. What she needed now wasn't found in conference rooms. Instead, she drove to the National Archives. Not as a general. Not even as a visitor of honor. Just as a citizen who needed to remember what had been promised to people like her long before the stars were stitched onto her shoulders. She stood in the rotunda beneath the domed ceiling and read the opening words of the Constitution again. We the people. And she thought about who that really included. Who it still didn't. A security guard noticed her and nodded, respectful but neutral. Welcome back, ma'am. Thank you, she replied gently, then added, I'm not sure we ever really left. Outside, the wind carried the early bite of November, and she zipped her jacket up to her neck. Her car waited at the curb, driverless. She wanted the walk. She wanted the cold to remind her she was still alive, still choosing. As she walked down Constitution Avenue, her phone buzzed. This time it was not press, not military, not even political. It was a name she hadn't seen in a long time, Cheryl Thompson. A voice memo. 37 seconds. She pressed play. Hey Mon, I know we haven't talked in, 12 years. I saw you on TV. My daughter recognized you before I did. Said, Mom, she looks like you if you were a superhero. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I guess I'm doing both. I'm proud of you. And I'm sorry for not believing you when you told me how hard it was back then, in training, being the only woman in your unit. I get it now. Anyway, if you're ever in Atlanta, coffee's on me. Monica stopped walking. The street noise blurred. She stood there for a full minute, listening again. Not to the message. To her heartbeat. To the reminder that time doesn't always close wounds, but sometimes it reopens bridges. When she got home that evening, her porch light flickered, a bulb long overdue for changing. The mailbox was stuffed again, mostly with letters that began with Dear General and ended with Thank you, or How can I help? She placed the stack on her kitchen table, unwrapped the scarf from her neck, and turned on the kettle. Then, a mother in Chicago said it gave her daughter the courage to wear her ROTC uniform again to school. Back in Culpeper County, the sheriff's department quietly implemented the oversight committee it had promised. It didn't make a lot of noise. There was no press release. Just a small bronze plaque at the entrance. We the people deserve to be seen, protected, and believed. A month after the incident, Monica stood once again behind a microphone. This time, at a national military leadership conference. The theme was redefining strength. She wasn't introduced with fanfare. No honorary music. Just a brief bio. And then she stepped to the stage. She looked out across a sea of uniforms. Brass. Medals. Eyes that had seen wars. And eyes that still didn't understand how the battlefield sometimes follows you home. She took a breath and began. You want to know the cost of calm? No slide. No preamble. It's your pulse slowing down so you don't get mistaken for a threat. It's remembering your training so deeply that you suppress your humanity to preserve your life. It's choosing silence over dignity because dignity can get you killed. She let that sit. But the reward of calm, she continued, is clarity. It's power without rage. It's the ability to expose injustice without losing yourself to it. She scanned the room. And that's what leadership looks like now. Not who commands the most, but who listens the longest, who stands the stillest, who doesn't run when the cameras turn off. She closed the talk without a rallying cry. No hashtags. No applause line. Just this. If the system won't protect us equally, then our stories will. So tell them. Loud. Quiet. In poems. In letters. In action. Tell them until silence becomes impossible. Then she stepped off the stage. No bow. No lingering smile. But everyone stood anyway. Not because they were told, but because she had earned it. And in that moment, she wasn't just the general they handcuffed. She was the woman who made the world stop and ask, what if calm is what saves us all?